court cards in the Book of Thoth, this book, are discussed by Aleister Crowley in the first place in groups of 4, just as we've done with the minor cards. So I thought it'd be instructive to go through what he says about the court cards here. It's a complex thing that goes on with the court cards because you have several ways of analysing them. One is where it's fire of water, water of air, and so on, so the 4 times 4 permutations. There is also another system where each of the court cards, set the princes, rules 30 degrees of the zodiac, but not in the way of Aries or something. There's a 10 degree overlap between them. And there's this table in the Book of Thoth, it's page 282 in my copy, where he goes through this. It's a complicated thing, and I'm not too sure it really works, to be honest with you. Anyway, it's in there. So let's see what he says about the court cards. So he starts off, these cards constitute a pictorial analysis of the powers of the 4 letters of the name and the 4 elements. The 4 letters of the name is Yod, He, Vav, He. So there's four letters in the name, and it's fire, water, air, and earth. They are also referred to the zodiac. But instead of assigning the 3 decans of each sign to the card, the influence begins with the last decan of one sign and continues to the 2nd decan of the next, which is what I've just said. There is a further difficulty. It might well be expected that the elemental attribution would harmonise with the zodiacal attribution, but it is not so. You know, people wonder why the court cards aren't easy to understand. So he says, for instance, one might anticipate that the fiery part of fire, which is this card, Knight of Wands, would refer to the most active of the fiery signs, namely Aries. On the contrary, it represents the last decan of Scorpio and the first 2 of Sagittarius, which is the watery part of fire in the zodiac, and the mildest in influence. I think this is kind of referring to this system is more to do with the pole star and the planets, the zodiac sign around it. The ACs represent a quadrant around the pole star, and they also relate to the princesses. So I think there's a kind of thing going on here more than astrology than you think. So the reason for this is that in the realm of the elements, all things are mixed and confused, or as the apologists might say, counterchecked and counterbalanced. Yeah, it's a balancing thing going on. It's with the tree of life, you have the push and pull of the active and the passive sides, and the centre that harmonises things. Here it's a little bit different. The convenience of these arrangements is that the cards are suitable as being descriptive in a rough and empirical fashion of diverse types of men and women. I think this is an area I diverge. It's an area that I diverge on in tarot, because I've completely given up trying to assign a type of person with a court card. It just doesn't work. For a start, you know, basically the court cards are all white and they're Eurasian, European. They're not Asian, they're not black, they're not Chinese. It's just not going to fit in. It's when I read Elemental Dignities and I see the cards either side of a court card, I would use those two cards with the elements with them to modify how I see what that card represents or where it might be found in that person's life, which is a much better way of doing things, more flexible as well. So then he goes on to say that one might say briefly that any of these cards is a picture of the person whose birth or whose rising sign as his nativity falls within zodiacal attribution of the card. Thus, a person born on the 12th of October might possess many of the qualities of the Queen of Swords, which, if he were born shortly before midnight, he would add many of the characteristics of the Prince of Wands. It's a moot point on these things. The interesting thing, at the back of these tables here, is another page with the triplicities of the zodiac. Okay, here it is here, right? And that's on page 286. Now, and so the triplicities of the zodiac, so the fire, lightning, air of fire, and water of fire, they're kind of to do with the, you can see that there's the astrological attributions that are going on there. Fire is Aries, air of fire is Leo, water of fire is Sagittarius. And you can also see them as fire being the Knight of Wands, the air of fire the Princess of Wands, and the water of fire the Queen of Wands. At the bottom, here's the giveaway. It says, in each case, the cardinal sign represents the birth of the element, the cherubic sign is life, and the mutable sign is passing towards the ideal from one form proper to it, i.e. to spirit. So also the spirits in the tower are on the thrones of spirit. So there's a kind of giveaway that is actually, you can actually use that system as well. There's a dualistic system going on with the tower that people don't realise. It's not that you have to do one or the other. Both are functioning, both are useful. And it's up to you to know which one to use, depending on the situation you're dealing with. So then he goes on to the general characteristics, and he does the four dignitaries, he calls them. So he does the knights first. Here are the knights in the Book of Thoth. We have the Knight of Wands, we have the Knight of Cups, we have the Knight of Swords, and we have the Knight of Discs. I'll put them in Yod He Vav He order, as you might be able to tell there. So he says the knights represent the power of the letter Yod in the name. So this is Yod He Vav He, Yod. They are the most sublime, original, active part of the energy of the element. For this reason, they are represented on horseback and clad in complete armour, which is what they are. If you look through those cards, they're all in armour and they're all on horseback. In the element of fire, for instance, the knight corresponds to the lightning flash. Now, if we go back to up here, he says fire is the lightning flash, swift violence of onset. So it does match. Okay, so you can do the offset 10-degree thing, or you can actually just go straight to the other table and use the standard attributions. I think you can tell where I would go on this. The knight corresponding in the element water to rain. So this is rain there, and for the water, rain. So there's the Knight of Cups, corresponds to rain. So there he's bringing in another aspect to these things in terms of weather and meteorological phenomenon. And also because we have, so for example, for the fire it has lightning, the sun and the rainbow. For water it has rain, the sea and a pool. For the air we have the winds, the clouds and vibrations. And for the earth we have mountains, plains and fields. So there's a geomorphological kind of and weather sort of phenomenon going on with these cards as well. So you can have an idea of the kind of terrain or the countryside the reading is to deal with as well in certain cases. And that's of earth to mountains. And the mountains is very much to do with Capricorn as well as the goat. So he's definitely, although he says and puts it in there, he's actually directly referring to this simple system of the fire, water, air and earth. And then he ends up saying, it is very important as a mental exercise to work out for oneself those correspondences between the symbol and the natural forces which they represent. So this is the thing, the core cards are natural forces as well, not just people. So we have three things now. There's the counter-changed 10-degree offset with the decadent system. We have the standard fire, water, fire, air, fire, and earth, fire. Fire of water, fire of water, fire of air, fire of earth are the knights, plus also the elemental thing of an elemental phenomena of either the land or the air that's going on as well. And it's essential to practical magical work to have assimilated this knowledge. So there's a clue as well. It's not just a divination thing he's talking about here. He's talking about magical knowledge, magical systems that are going into it. Much deeper than we thought, isn't it? So, we've done the knights. Now we move on to the queens. Here's the queens. We have the Queen of Wands, Queen of Cups, Queen of Swords, and the Queen of Discs. Okay. So, Crowley says the queens represent the letter He of the name, Yod He Vav He, so that's the first He. There's two He's. They are the complements of the knights. They receive, ferment, and transmit the original energy of their knight. Quick to receive that energy, they also fitted to endure for the period of their function. But they're not the final product. They represent the second stage in the process of creation, whose fourth and last stage is material realization. They are represented as seated upon thrones. This emphasizes the fact that they are appointed to exercise definite functions. Now, there's a lot of points in there, and there's a lot of information. So from that last point about the knights, we know that we're actually into magical operations rather than just fortune telling. Okay, and since I'm going to do this as the first of this series of videos on the minor arcana, so the court cards and the aces to the tens. Okay, I thought it'd be better to put the court cards first. This is all about to do with Liber 777 as well, and Liber 777 I have on my website supertarot.co.uk, and it is very much about the attributions of the tarot to do with magic and ritual as well. And later on, when we do the twos and the threes, the twos relate to Hukmah, which is to do with the zodiac, the whirling forces, and they are the knights, the father. And the three in Bina is very much to do with the thrones, the queens. Okay, so this is in the supernal triangle, the line across. We have the knights and the queens. And this relates in the supernal system of the Sefer Yetzirah and in other Kabbalistic systems. They're called the parts of him. They're called the people. Those people are in there. And this is a lot to do with sex magic as well. So when he says they represent the second stage of process of creation, whose fourth is and last is the material realization. The princesses are the material realization. It's the manifestation of what happens between the knight and the queen, through the prince down to the princess. They're appointed to exercise definite functions. The definite functions we're going to find out about in actual descriptions of the Queen Court cards. So for now we've done the Queen, so let's move on to the Princes. And the Princes are the Knight of Cups, the Prince of Wands, the Knight of Cups, the Knight of Swords, and the Knight of Discs. The Prince of Discs. They're all princes. See how confusing it gets? You wouldn't think I've been reading tarot for years, would you? So the princes represent the forces of the letter vowel in the name, Yod He Vav He. So now down to vowel, the third place. The prince is the son of the queen, the old queen's daughter, by the knight who has won her. Now this is an interesting kind of thing that we have here. It's a bit like the story of the princess and the pea, where the suitor comes from another place to win the hand of the princess, and he has to do various tests and things like this. And this kind of thing is discussed very much in the prince, in the Fool card, here in the Book of Thoth. There's a whole section on that. So the prince is therefore represented as in a chariot, going forth to carry out the combined energy of his parents. So that combined energy of fire and water comes down to the point of air. So this energy is brought down to Tiphereth, which is where the princesses are. We're back on the centre line of the Tree of Life. So that combined energy of fire and water is brought to the point of Prince. He is the intellectual image of their union. His action is consequently more enduring than that of his forebears. In one respect, indeed, he he acquires a relative permanence, which is interesting. We can talk about that. Also, he is the dying God, redeeming his bride in the hour by the virtue of his murder. Now, the dying gods, Jesus is a dying God. Osiris is as well. So this whole kind of doctrine that comes into here, that we're not going to go into, but yeah, there's this transformational kind of thing that's going on. It's about redeeming as well, and you find this very much in the redeeming thing. I think is to do with Parsifal. Goes into this concept as well. So now we can move on to the princesses, and here we have Princess of Wands, Princess of Cups, Princess of Swords, and the Princess of Discs. Okay, so the princesses are the counterpart of the princes, logically, which is why it makes so much more sense than you try and do the Rider-Waite system. Now, the princesses represent the hay final of the name, your hay, bar hay. So we had water, hay is water for the queen, and then the second time round it's hay final for the princess. There's the feminine things that are going on there. They represent the ultimate issue of the original any in its completion, its crystallization, its materialization. They also represent the counterbalancing, the reabsorption of the energy. They represent the silence into which all things return. They are thus at the same time permanent and non-existent, an audit of the equation naught equals 0, naught equals 2. Crowley's favourite equation. This is duality that's coming in here. So now you'd think that because they're princes and princesses, that he would be talking about the king, the knight and the queen uniting to produce a prince, therefore it would be the same for the princesses. But it's not, is it? And I think it's a lot to do with actually, it's the influence of Keter for the aces, because we talk about the aces and the princesses. The attribute of Keter, the crown, is silence. Because if you have a tree of life above another tree of life, the point of Keter will be below the discs of Malkuth. So this is the whole kind of doctrine he's talking about. So the princesses relate to the pole star and the crown Keter, and the aces in particular. And also when we discuss the aces, you'll find that Crowley doesn't actually, in the sections where he's talking about the groups of forecasts together, that he doesn't give a divinatory application or attribution to the aces, because aces are essentially space akasha. There's nothing there, which is why he has the silence.